She didn't mean to text him. Her hands were shaking too badly to notice the number was wrong. Blood pooled on the bathroom tile beneath her knees. Not enough to die from, but enough to know this time was different. This time, Evan wasn't stopping at bruises she could hide beneath her scrubs. The man she loved was counting down from 10 on the other side of the locked door. 9. His voice was calm. That was always the worst sign. 8. Naomi pressed her spine against the bathroom door. Her phone clutched in trembling fingers. The screen was cracked, had been since Tuesday, when he'd thrown it across their Lincoln Park apartment after she'd smiled at the barista who remembered her usual order. She'd learned to stop smiling at strangers. She'd learned a lot of things in the 2 years since she'd said yes to his proposal. 7. She pulled up her messages, scrolling with a thumb that left a smear of red across the glass. Jessica, her co-worker, the only person who'd noticed when Naomi started wearing long sleeves in summer, when her lunch breaks became crying sessions in her car parked behind Northwestern Memorial Hospital. If I don't answer again, it's because he finally killed me. Her finger hovered over send. This was it. This was the moment she admitted out loud that the decorated Chicago Police Department detective she'd met at a hospital fundraiser, the man who'd swept her off her feet with flowers and rooftop dinners overlooking Lake Michigan, was going to murder her in the bathroom of the apartment they shared. 6. She hit send. The reply came 12 seconds later. Who is this? Naomi's heart stopped. She looked at the number. Her vision blurred from tears or the concussion. She wasn't sure. That wasn't Jessica's contact. The last digit was off. She'd texted a complete stranger. 5. Naomi. Evan's voice dropped to that dangerous whisper. Open the door, baby. Let's talk about this. They'd been talking for 30 minutes. Talking was what he called it when his fists did most of the communication. It had started over something stupid it always did. She'd mentioned wanting to pick up an extra shift at the hospital. He'd heard it as an accusation that his salary wasn't enough. Then he'd seen a text from Marcus, the ER resident who'd asked about her availability for the weekend rotation. That was when talking turned to screaming. Screaming turned to shoving. Shoving turned to her temple meeting the corner of their marble kitchen counter. 4. Her phone buzzed again. Where are you? She shouldn't answer. This person couldn't help her. Nobody could help her. Evan was a cop. He knew all the other cops. He knew the judges. He had the kind of political connections that made people like her trauma nurses from the South Side who'd worked 3 jobs to get through nursing school disappear from the narrative entirely. She'd tried to leave once. He'd found her at her sister's place in Pilsen within 4 hours. She'd tried to file a report. The officer taking her statement had gone to the academy with Evan. The report never made it into the system. 3. Where are you? The stranger was still asking. Something about that second message made her throat tight. Not, what do you want? Or, stop texting me. Just a simple question. A demand, even. Like whoever this was actually expected an answer. Like they might actually do something. Naomi's fingers moved before her brain could stop them. 2,840 newtons. Lincoln Avenue. Apt 4B. Lincoln Park. Chicago. If I don't make it out tonight, please tell someone my name was Naomi. Naomi Carter. The reply came instantly. Don't hang up. Don't call police. Stay exactly where you are. 2. Naomi. Evan's palm slammed against the door. The whole frame shook. He'd put his shoulder into the next one. The lock wouldn't hold. It was decorative, meant to provide privacy, not protection from a man who'd played linebacker at Notre Dame before deciding law enforcement was his calling. She opened her mouth to scream, but what came out was a sob. 1. That was when the lights went out, not just in the bathroom. The crack of light beneath the door vanished. The apartment went silent, no hum of the refrigerator, no ambient glow from the Chicago skyline that usually filtered through their floor-to-ceiling windows. Evan stopped counting. What the hell? His voice shifted, no longer directed at her. She heard his footsteps retreat from the bathroom, heard him stumbling through the darkness toward the living room. Naomi, did you do something to the power outage wasn't just their apartment. Through the small frosted window above the toilet, she could see that the building across the street had gone dark too. The streetlights on Lincoln Avenue gone, the traffic signals at the intersection black. Her phone buzzed. The screen's glow was the only light in the suffocating darkness. 8 minutes. That was all the message said. She didn't understand. 8 minutes until what? She heard something outside. Not in the hallway. Outside. The kind of sound that doesn't belong in a residential neighborhood at 11 p.m. on a Thursday night. Heavy. Mechanical. Like trucks. But not delivery trucks. Not the kind of vehicles that rolled down tree-lined Lincoln Park streets, where young professionals paid $4,000 a month for apartments, with vintage charm and modern amenities. Evan heard it too. The hell is that? His footsteps moved toward the window. She heard the curtain slide open. Then she heard him swear. Not the casual profanity he used when the Bears lost. The kind of swearing that came from deep, primal fear. Naomi. His voice had changed completely. Naomi, get out here. Now. She didn't move. Her back stayed pressed against the door. Her phone stayed clutched to her chest, counting down minutes she didn't understand. Naomi. Something in his tone made her hands move on instinct. Muscle memory from 2 years of conditioning. She reached up, unlocked the door, stumbled out into the pitch-black apartment. Evan grabbed her wrist not violently, for once, but with the grip of someone who'd just realized he was no longer the most dangerous thing in the room. He dragged her to the window. "Tell me you didn't do this," he whispered. "Tell me you didn't call someone." Naomi looked down at Lincoln Avenue. 3 black SUVs sat in the middle of the street. No headlights, no running lights. Engines idling so quietly they were almost silent. The kind of vehicles that cost more than most people's houses. The kind that had bulletproof glass and modifications you couldn't see in the dark. Men stood between the vehicles. She couldn't count them. They didn't move like cops or emergency responders. They moved like they owned the street, the night, the very air around them. One of them looked up, directly at their window, directly at her. Evan's phone rang, shattering the silence. His personal cell, not his work phone. He answered it on speaker, because his hands were shaking too badly to hold it steady. Detective Cole. The voice on the other end was calm, professional. The kind of voice used in boardrooms and courtrooms. "You need to step outside. Alone. Who the hell is this? You have 2 minutes to comply. If you don't, we'll come up. You won't like that." The line went dead. Evan turned to her, and in the faint glow from his phone screen, Naomi saw something she'd never seen before in the 3 years she'd known him. Terror. "What did you do?" he breathed. Her phone buzzed. 6 minutes. The first time Evan hit her was 6 months after they moved in together. It was so casual, she almost didn't process it as violence. They'd been arguing about her student loans, $87,000 from Northwestern's nursing program, a weight she carried in every paycheck, every declined dinner invitation, every time she passed a clothing store, and kept walking. He'd said something about her poor financial decisions. She'd pointed out that her job literally saved lives, while his involved writing reports about people who were already dead. He'd laughed. Then his hand had connected with her cheek. Just once. He'd apologized immediately, bought her flowers, made reservations at Alinea, the Michelin-starred restaurant she'd only ever seen on Instagram, cried, while promising it would never happen again. It happened again 3 weeks later, then 2 weeks after that. Then it stopped being something she could count between incidents and started being something she counted between moments of peace. Naomi had studied trauma in nursing school. She'd learned the statistics, the cycles, the warning signs. She'd sat across from domestic violence victims in the ER and thought, with the arrogance of someone who'd never lived it, that she would never let it get that bad. But bad didn't happen all at once. Bad was a slow erosion. Bad was giving up your Saturday morning yoga class because it made him anxious when you were gone. Bad was changing your phone passcode to something he knew, because privacy meant you had something to hide. Bad was learning to measure your words, your tone, your facial expressions, calculating which version of yourself would make it through the evening without bloodshed. Bad was pressing your back against a bathroom door at 28 years old, texting a stranger because everyone else in your life had slowly, methodically, been cut away. Now that stranger had sent men to her door, and Evan, who'd never shown fear of anything, who'd chased armed suspects through Englewood, who'd stared down gang members in interrogation rooms, was shaking. "I'm not going down there," he said, backing away from the window. "This is insane. I'm calling this in." He pulled out his work phone. Dialed. Nothing. He tried again. "They're jamming the signal," he whispered. "Jesus Christ. Naomi, who did you contact?" She didn't answer because she didn't know. Some stranger who'd responded to a mistyped number. Some person who'd asked where she was, and then apparently mobilized an entire tactical team in less than 10 minutes. Some person who'd told her not to call the police. "You need to go down there," she heard herself say. Evan spun on her. "Are you out of your mind? They want you, not me. If you don't go, they'll come up here." Her voice was steady. That was strange. Everything about this was strange. "They said you wouldn't like that." He grabbed her shoulders. In the dark, she couldn't see his face, but she could feel his breath, hot and quick and reeking of the whiskey he'd been drinking before this all started. "Listen to me. We're going to hide. There's a space behind the apartment door exploded inward. Not kicked in. Not rammed. The sound was wrong, too quick. Too clean. Like it had been surgically removed from its hinges and simply ceased to exist as an obstacle. The darkness swallowed whatever came through the doorway. But Naomi heard them. Multiple footsteps. Synchronized. Professional. Evan reached for his service weapon. He never cleared the holster. Someone moved in the dark. A blur of motion. A precise strike. Evan made a sound between a gasp and a grunt. And then he was on the ground. And Naomi couldn't see what they were doing to him, but she could hear it. The efficient brutality of people who'd done this before. She should have been terrified. Some part of her was. But a larger part, the part that had been systematically beaten down over 2 years, the part that had learned to make herself small and quiet and invisible, that part was singing. The darkness pressed in. Shapes moved through her apartment with the confidence of people who didn't need light to navigate. She heard drawers opening, heard the click of electronics being disabled. Evan was begging now. The words were muffled, like he was face down on the hardwood floors they'd picked out together at that overpriced boutique in Wicker Park. "Please, please, I'm a cop. I'm CPD. You can't." "We can." The voice was calm. American. No accent she could place. "Stay down. Make this harder, and it gets worse." Naomi felt a hand on her arm. She flinched, muscle memory. "Miss Carter." Different voice. Younger. "We're leaving now. Come with me." "I don't." "Who are you?" "Someone who's going to get you out of here. That's all you need to know right now." She let him guide her. Through the darkness of her living room, past the couch where she and Evan had watched movies before he'd started deciding what she was allowed to watch. Past the kitchen, where she'd learned to cook his favorite meals exactly right, because undercooked risotto meant a split lip. At the door where her door used to be, she stopped. "Is he alive?" "Yes." "Will he follow you?" "No." The man guiding her had a kind voice. That felt wrong. People who removed doors from their hinges and disabled cops in under 30 seconds shouldn't have kind voices. In the hallway, there was more light. Emergency exit signs provided faint red glows. She could see her guide now, tall, black, built like he'd played professional sports before moving into whatever this was. He had the kind of face that belonged in an action movie. All angles and intensity. "Stairs," he said simply. They descended 4 flights. She was barefoot, hadn't even thought to grab shoes. The concrete was cold against her soles. She was still wearing the clothes she'd worn to the hospital for her shift. Scrub pants and a Northwestern Memorial hoodie. There was blood on both, hers or patient's. She couldn't remember. At the ground floor, another man waited. He opened the exterior door without a word. The street looked like a movie set. The 3 SUVs formed a perimeter. More men stood at intervals, watching windows, watching the intersections. A few neighbors had cracked their doors open despite the blackout. Those doors closed quickly when the men looked their way. This way. The middle SUV's rear door stood open. Interior lights off, like everything else. She climbed in, guided by a hand on her elbow, careful, respectful even, the kind of touch so different from what she'd become used to that it almost made her cry. The door closed behind her. The interior smelled like leather and something expensive she couldn't name. The seats were obscenely comfortable. There was a privacy partition between the front and back, currently closed. She was alone. Her phone buzzed. 0 minutes. Then the driver's door opened. Someone slid into the front seat. The partition stayed up. The engine, already running, shifted into gear. They pulled away from her building as the streetlights flickered back to life. Through the tinted rear window, Naomi watched her apartment building shrink into the Chicago skyline. 4 years she'd lived in this city. 4 years of building a life, a career, a future. 20 minutes to watch it all disappear. She should have been panicking, should have been demanding answers, making calls, planning escape routes. Instead, she felt nothing. No, that wasn't true. She felt one thing: relief. The SUV turned north on Clark Street, moving with the smooth confidence of a vehicle that knew it wouldn't be stopped. They passed the DePaul campus, the restaurants and bars where she'd spent her early 20s, the Lake Michigan waterfront, where Evan had proposed on a perfect June evening that now felt like it had happened to someone else. Her phone buzzed again. Different number. She shouldn't answer. She shouldn't engage. Every thriller movie, every true crime podcast, every workplace safety training said not to cooperate with kidnappers, but her finger swiped to answer anyway. Miss Carter. Not a question. A statement. The voice was deep, controlled, accented. She thought Korean. Maybe, though she'd never been good at placing Asian accents. My name is irrelevant right now. What matters is that you're safe. Am I? A pause. That depends on your definition of safe. Where are you taking me? Somewhere Detective Cole can't reach you. Somewhere his department, his connections, his political allies can't manufacture a reason to drag you back to him. Her throat tightened. You know who he is. I know exactly who he is. The voice carried an edge now, like granite scraping against granite. I know his record, his medals, his family's influence in Chicago politics. I know that he's assaulted 4 previous partners, and that each complaint mysteriously vanished. I know that he's being groomed for a mayoral run in 8 years, and I know that men like him believe they're untouchable. How do you? When you sent that text, Miss Carter, you triggered a chain of events. I had you researched, thoroughly. Within 4 minutes, I knew your name, your job, your address, your relationship history, and your fiancé's violent record. Within 6 minutes, I knew the building's security system, the power grid's vulnerabilities, and exactly how many officers would respond to a 911 call from that neighborhood. Naomi's hands had stopped shaking. That was strange too. Why? Because you asked for help, and I'm not in the habit of ignoring such requests when they land in my hands. The SUV turned onto Lakeshore Drive, heading north. The city lights sparkled off Lake Michigan like diamonds on black velvet. She'd always loved this view. Evan had proposed to take it away from her by moving them to a suburb where he could keep her safe. Safe. The word had meant something different when he said it. What happens now? She asked. Now you rest. Tomorrow we'll discuss your options. Options. Whether you want to press charges. Whether you want to disappear entirely. Whether you want... He paused. Whether you want other arrangements made. The way he said, other arrangements, made something cold slide down her spine. I don't want him dead, she heard herself say. Noted. That particular option remains available should you change your mind. The line went dead. Naomi stared at her phone. The cracked screen displayed her lock screen, a photo from 2 years ago. Her and Evan at Navy Pier, both smiling, his arm around her shoulders in a way that looked protective in photographs and felt like a vice in reality. She pulled up her contacts, found Jessica, started to type an explanation, stopped. What could she possibly say? That she'd mistyped a number and accidentally texted someone who commanded private military teams, that she'd been extracted from her apartment like a CIA asset, that she was currently driving through Chicago in a vehicle that probably cost more than she'd make in 5 years. She deleted the draft, turned off her phone. The SUV exited Lakeshore Drive somewhere around Evanston. The neighborhoods grew wealthier. The houses grew larger. The spaces between streetlights grew wider. They turned into a private drive marked only by a subtle stone pillar. No sign, no gate, just an understanding that people who belonged here knew where they were going. The drive wound through manicured grounds. She caught glimpses of gardens, a fountain, structures that might have been guest houses. Then the main building came into view. Calling it a house felt insufficient. It was modern, all glass and steel and impossible angles, perched on a bluff, overlooking the lake. Light spilled from floor to ceiling windows, turning the building into a beacon against the night sky. The SUV stopped at the entrance. Her door opened. The kind man from her apartment stood there, offering a hand. "Miss Carter, if you'll come with me." She stepped out onto cobblestone. Her bare feet registered the cold, but distantly, like information arriving from a source she no longer quite trusted. The front door opened before they reached it. Inside was warmth, light, the smell of something cooking. The foyer alone was larger than her apartment had been. The floors were stone, not marble. Something darker, more subtle. Art hung on walls that soared 20 feet high. A staircase curved upward, each step a floating piece of illuminated glass. "Upstairs," the man said gently. "Third door on the right. There's clothing in your size, toiletries, everything you'll need. Someone will bring dinner in 30 minutes. How do you have clothing in my size?" He smiled slightly. "Miss Carter, we knew your dress size before we knew your name. Rest now. Tomorrow you'll have questions. They'll be answered." He departed, leaving her alone in the cavernous space. Naomi walked upstairs on numb feet. The hallway was lined with doors, all closed. The third on the right was open, revealing a bedroom that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine. King bed with white linens, windows overlooking the lake, a bathroom visible through an open door that featured a tub large enough to swim in, and laid out on the bed, a set of clothes, yoga pants, soft t-shirt, hoodie, all in her size, all in her preferred style, all perfectly, impossibly prepared. She walked to the window. Lake Michigan stretched to the horizon, a vast darkness broken only by the distant lights of ships and the occasional lighthouse. Chicago's skyline glowed to the south, familiar and foreign all at once. Her phone was still off. That felt important somehow. Like as long as it stayed dark, this moment could exist in suspension, neither real nor unreal. Behind her, the door clicked, shut softly. She was alone. Safe, the voice on the phone had said. She thought about that word, turned it over in her mind like a stone she'd found on a beach, examining its surfaces, testing its weight. For 2 years, she hadn't been safe. For 2 years, she'd lived in a state of constant calculation, constant vigilance, constant fear dressed up as love. And now some stranger had simply removed her from that equation. Just like that. Like it was easy. Like all it took was saying yes to help when it was offered, even from the wrong number. Naomi sat on the edge of the bed. The mattress was absurdly comfortable. Her body sank into it like it had been waiting for this moment, this permission to stop fighting. She lay back, stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow there would be questions, consequences, a reckoning with whatever she'd accidentally set in motion. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, she could close her eyes, without fearing what would happen when she opened them. The wrong number, she thought distantly, as sleep began to pull her under. Maybe it was exactly the right one. Naomi woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For 3 perfect seconds, she existed in the space between sleep and consciousness, where the mind hasn't yet reconstructed the architecture of current reality. Then memory crashed back the bathroom, the text, the darkness, the extraction. She sat up too quickly. Her head spun. Right, the concussion. She'd almost forgotten about the head wound in the chaos of everything that followed. The bedside clock read 9:47 a.m. She'd slept almost 11 hours. On the nightstand sat a glass of water and 2 pills, beside a handwritten note on expensive cardstock. For the headache, ibuprofen, 800 milligrams. Breakfast downstairs when you're ready. The handwriting was precise, masculine, not a doctor's scrawl but the careful script of someone who'd learned English as a second language. She took the pills, dressed in the clothes that had been left for her, found a new toothbrush, still packaged, in the bathroom alongside luxury toiletries. she'd only ever seen in hotel magazines. Downstairs, she followed the smell of coffee. The kitchen was a masterpiece of design. White countertops, professional appliances, windows overlooking the lake. A woman in her 50s stood at the stove, cooking something that made Naomi's stomach growl despite her anxiety. "Good morning." The woman turned, smiled warmly. "I'm Diane. I manage the household. How do you take your eggs?" I scrambled. Naomi felt disoriented by the normalcy. "Thank you. No trouble at all. Please, sit." The breakfast bar looked out over the water. Naomi perched on a stool, accepting a mug of coffee that tasted better than anything she'd ever made in her own kitchen. "Mr. Kang will be with you shortly," Diane said, sliding a plate of eggs, bacon, and toast in front of her. "He had business to attend to this morning but wanted to speak with you before noon." "Mr. Kang." "Yes, your host." Diane's tone was matter-of-fact, like hosting women extracted from violent situations was a regular occurrence. Maybe it was. Naomi ate mechanically. The food was excellent. Everything in this house was excellent. That felt significant somehow, though she couldn't articulate why. She'd finished eating when she heard footsteps behind her. "Ms. Carter," the voice from the phone. She turned. The man standing in the kitchen doorway wasn't what she'd expected. Tall, maybe 6'1", with the kind of build that came from disciplined training rather than vanity. Black hair swept back from a face that belonged in Seoul or Los Angeles, or anywhere money and power converged. He wore a charcoal suit, tailored so precisely it probably cost more than her nursing school loans. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. Dark, assessing, and utterly devoid of the performative warmth most people used when meeting strangers. This was someone who'd learned early that charm was optional when you commanded fear. "Mr. Kang," she said. "Jun Sok." He moved into the kitchen with the fluid confidence of someone absolutely certain of his welcome everywhere he went. The formality seems unnecessary given the circumstances. He poured himself coffee, added nothing to it, took a sip while studying her with the focus of someone conducting an appraisal. "How's your head?" "Better. Thank you for..." She gestured vaguely at everything. "All of this." "You're welcome." He leaned against the counter across from her. "Though gratitude isn't what I came to discuss. We need to talk about your situation." "My situation." "Detective Cole. The legal complications. Your immediate future." Naomi set down her coffee mug. "I should go home." "You don't have a home." His tone wasn't cruel, just factual. "That apartment was a crime scene by the time we left. CPD responded to reports of a disturbance. Your belongings are currently in evidence or being held by building management. Your landlord has already been contacted by Cole's attorney regarding the lease." "He can't just..." "He can. He has. Your name is attached to an active investigation. You're currently listed as a person of interest in an assault on a police officer." The words hit her like physical blows. "That's insane." I was the one being. "I'm aware. Unfortunately, awareness and evidence are different things." Jun Sok's expression didn't shift. "Cole filed a report this morning claiming you became violent during an argument, that you attacked him with a kitchen knife, that he defended himself, and that unknown assailants invaded your home during the altercation. That's a lie. All of it. Yes, it's also the official record, supported by a decorated officer with 18 character witnesses and no prior complaints on file. I told you there were prior complaints. Previous girlfriends, who recanted their statements, who moved out of state, who signed NDAs we're currently working to break." He took another sip of coffee. "Dismantling his credibility will take time we don't have. Which brings us to option 1. There are options. There are always options, Miss Carter. The question is which ones you're willing to accept." He set down his mug. "Option 1. We provide you with new identification, a new city, a new life. You disappear. Cole loses interest when there's no victim to prosecute. You start over. Witness protection. Similar concept. Different execution. We're more thorough than the federal government." She studied his face. "Why would you do that?" "Because you texted me asking for help. I don't do things halfway. But you don't know me. This is..." She struggled for words. "This is insane. You mobilized a team. You extracted me from my home. You're offering to completely reconstruct my identity, all because of a wrong number. Something flickered across his expression. Too quick to read. Not entirely. What does that mean? We'll get to that. First, I need to know if option 1 interests you. Naomi thought about it. A new name, a new city, starting over. It had appeal, clean break, fresh start, all the clichés that desperate people cling to. But she'd spent 2 years being erased, 2 years becoming smaller, quieter, less herself with each passing month. The idea of erasing herself further, even by choice, felt like letting Evan win. What's option 2? June-Sok's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. You stay. You fight. We provide resources, legal representation, media strategy, protective security. You testify against Cole. We find evidence. We break his narrative. That could take months. Years. Yes. And meanwhile I'm what? Living here? Among other arrangements. What other arrangements? He pushed off from the counter, moved to the window, stood with his back to her, looking out at the lake. You need to understand who I am, he said quietly. What I am. You're some kind of, she searched for the right word, organized crime. Syndicate. We don't organize crime so much as we organize everything. Import-export operations, real estate holdings, financial instruments that exist in the spaces between legal and technically legal. I operate between Los Angeles, New York, Seoul, and wherever business takes me. Currently, that's Chicago. Why are you telling me this? Because if you stay, you'll be associated with me, publicly. Cole and his attorneys will use that association to discredit you. They'll paint you as a criminal's mistress, a gold digger who traded one bad man for a worse one. But that's not true? No. Relevant? Also no. He turned to face her. In my world, Miss Carter, perception is more powerful than truth. And the perception we'll create is that you're under my protection. Do you understand what that means? She thought she did. Started to answer. He continued before she could. It means that every legal motion filed against you will be tied up in bureaucratic delays. It means that witnesses who might testify for Cole will suddenly have scheduling conflicts or memory problems. It means that evidence favorable to your case will materialize, while evidence against you will become contaminated or inadmissible. It means that judges who might otherwise rule against you will find themselves concerned about appearing biased. You're talking about corruption. I'm talking about leverage. Chicago runs on leverage. Always has. His gaze held hers. But it also means that when you walk into a courtroom, everyone will know you're mine. My responsibility. My investment. They'll make assumptions about how that happened, what you're giving me in return, what kind of person accepts help from someone like me, and what kind of person does accept help from someone like you, someone who's tired of being a victim. The words hung in the air between them. Outside, waves rolled against the shoreline. Inside, Diane worked quietly in the adjacent room, giving them privacy while remaining close enough to intervene if needed. Naomi stood, walked to the window, stood beside him, not quite close enough to touch. There's a third option, she said quietly. Is there? I walk out that door. I take my chances. I find a shelter, get a public defender, hope the system works the way it's supposed to. You'd be arrested within 12 hours. Cole would post bail. The system would consume you slowly, while he walked free. But I'd be free of whatever this is. She gestured at the house, at him, at the situation. I wouldn't owe anyone anything. You don't owe me anything now. Then why are you doing this? June-Sok was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Not softer, exactly, but more honest, less performative. 3 years ago, I had business in Chicago, at Northwestern Memorial Hospital. Actually, a colleague's daughter needed specialized surgery. I was in the waiting room when a woman came through, trauma nurse, dealing with a gang shooting victim. She worked on him for 45 minutes in the ER, saved his life. The kid was 16, would have bled out without her. Naomi's breath stopped. After, she collapsed in the hallway. Another nurse helped her up. I heard part of their conversation. She'd worked a double shift, hadn't eaten, had driven through a snowstorm to get there because they were understaffed. She was exhausted, obviously in pain, but she'd saved that kid's life anyway. That could have been any nurse. You had a bruise on your cheekbone, badly covered with makeup. Your hands shook when you filled out paperwork. You walked like someone with cracked ribs, and when a security guard asked if you were okay, you smiled and said you were fine with the practiced ease of someone who'd said it 1,000 times. Her throat closed. I made inquiries, Junseok continued. Learned your name, learned about your fiancé, learned that you'd filed a report 6 months earlier that vanished. I wanted to intervene then. Why didn't you? Because you hadn't asked for help. Agency matters, Miss Carter. I don't save people who don't want to be saved. But I kept track, made sure there were systems in place if you ever reached out. The number you texted belongs to a phone I've carried for 3 years, specifically in case you ever needed it. Naomi turned to face him fully. You're saying this was planned? All of it? You've been watching me for 3 years? Monitoring, not watching. There's a difference. Is there? Her voice shook. Because from where I'm standing, it sounds like you've been stalking me. If that's how you want to characterize keeping someone safe from a distance. Yes, I suppose I have. No apology in his tone. No shame. Just fact. When your text came through last night, I was in a meeting with a state senator. I walked out mid-sentence. I had a team assembled in 6 minutes. In 8, we were at your door. Because you'd been planning it. Because I'd been waiting for you to give me permission to help. And now what? I'm supposed to be grateful? Fall into your arms? You're supposed to make a choice. He stepped closer. Not threatening, she'd learned to recognize threatening proximity. This was something else. Option 1. New life. Fresh start. You never see me again. Option 2. You stay. You fight. I provide resources. Option 3. You walk out that door and I respect your decision, even though we both know how it ends. Those aren't real options. They're the only options I can offer. The rest is up to you. She wanted to scream, to rage, to demand he explain why someone with his resources and power had spent 3 years monitoring her life instead of just dealing with Evan directly. But she knew why. Because forcing help on someone was just another form of control. Because saving someone who didn't want saving was kidnapping with better intentions. Because for 3 years, he'd watched and waited and given her the one thing Evan never had. Choice. How long do I have? She asked. To decide. As long as you need. This house is yours whether you stay or leave. My protection extends either way. Cole won't find you here. He'll look. Let him. Junseok's expression hardened. Detective Cole is currently dealing with an internal affairs investigation that began this morning. Anonymous tip about evidence tampering in previous cases. He's also facing a civil suit from a previous girlfriend we located in Portland. She's decided to break her NDA, and his captain received a very detailed dossier about his disciplinary history that somehow never made it into his personnel file. You did all that overnight. I did all that 3 years ago. I've been sitting on it, waiting for the right moment to deploy it. He checked his watch. Right now, Cole is in his lawyer's office, learning that fighting back against you will cost him significantly more than letting you go. By end of business today, he'll receive an offer. Drop all charges, accept full responsibility, resign quietly, and the evidence I have about his past stays sealed. Or fight, and I destroy his career, his reputation, and his family's political ambitions. And if he fights, then we move to more permanent solutions. The casual way he said it made something cold settle in her stomach. I don't want him killed, she said again. Noted. Though I'd argue that men like Cole are already dead in the ways that matter. We'd simply be making the condition official. That's not your decision to make. No, it's yours, which is why I'm giving you options. He moved toward the door, paused. Take today. Think it through. Tomorrow we'll discuss specifics. There's a library on the 2nd floor, a gym in the basement, grounds to walk if you need space. Diane will provide anything you need. And, Miss Carter? Yes, thank you. She blinked. For what? For texting me. For trusting that message enough to answer my questions. for giving me permission to finally do what I've wanted to do for 3 years. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. I've been waiting a long time to meet you properly. He left before she could respond. Naomi stood in the kitchen, coffee going cold in her hand, watching the space where he'd been. She'd been saved, or captured, or claimed. She wasn't sure which. Maybe all three. Maybe it didn't matter. Outside, Lake Michigan rolled on, indifferent to the choices being made on its shores. Ships moved through the shipping lanes. Birds wheeled in the morning sky. The world continued, the same as it had yesterday, the same as it would tomorrow. But Naomi Carter, trauma nurse, survivor, accidental recipient of help from the wrong number, stood in a mansion overlooking the water and tried to decide which version of herself she wanted to be next. The one who ran, the one who fought, or the one who stayed in the orbit of a man who'd spent 3 years watching her suffer, waiting for permission to intervene. She looked down at her phone. 7 missed calls from Jessica, 12 texts. The concern was palpable, even through digital communication. She should answer, should explain, should do 100 things responsible people did when their lives imploded. Instead, she turned off her phone again, walked through the house that was apparently hers now, whether she wanted it or not, found the library Jun-Sok had mentioned, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, a window seat overlooking the lake, curled up in that window seat with a book she didn't read, and tried not to think about the fact that for the first time in years, she felt safe, even if that safety came with a price she couldn't yet calculate. By the 3rd day, Naomi had explored every accessible room in the house. The library held first editions worth more than her annual salary. The gym featured equipment she'd only seen in luxury health clubs. The wine cellar, because of course there was a wine cellar, contained bottles with price tags that made her lightheaded. But certain doors stayed locked. The second wing of the 2nd floor, the basement level beneath the gym, an office on the 1st floor that Diane politely redirected her from when she'd wandered too close. Mr. Kang's private spaces, Diane explained with a smile. Nothing sinister, dear. Just business materials and personal items. You're welcome everywhere else. Everywhere else was more than enough. What troubled Naomi wasn't the locked doors. It was how quickly she'd become comfortable with their existence. 3 days ago, she'd been plotting escape. Now she was drinking $200 wine and reading in a window seat while lake waves provided ambient sound. Stockholm Syndrome crept in softly, apparently, or maybe, and this was the thought that kept her awake at night. Maybe this was just what it felt like when someone treated you like you mattered. On the afternoon of day 3, Jun-Sok returned. She was in the gym when Diane found her. Mr. Kang would like to speak with you. The study, when you're ready. Naomi showered quickly, dressed in clothes from the wardrobe that had somehow appeared in her room, her size, her style, brands she'd admired but never purchased. She was starting to understand that Jun-Sok's surveillance over the past 3 years had been thorough enough to border on invasive. The study was off the main living area, a room she'd passed but never entered. She knocked. "Come in." He sat behind a desk of dark wood and chrome, laptop open, phone face down beside him. The wall behind him was glass, framing the lake like a painting. He'd shed his suit jacket, rolled up his sleeves. This was as casual as she'd seen him. "Miss Carter, sit." She took one of the leather chairs opposite his desk. "I thought we were doing first names now." "Are we?" His expression didn't change. "Have you decided to stay?" "I don't know yet." "Fair enough. Miss Carter it is." He closed his laptop with a soft click. "I have news." Cole accepted the offer. Her breath caught. "He's dropping the charges?" "All of them." He filed paperwork this morning, recanting his statement, claiming the assault was misreported due to his own confusion during a home invasion. He's taking a leave of absence from CPD. His lawyer issued a statement about seeking treatment for personal issues. That's it? He had no choice. The evidence we provided his attorney made it clear that fighting would cost him everything. This way, he loses his career but keeps his reputation mostly intact. His family's political connections survive. And you, Jun-Sok leaned back in his chair, are no longer a person of interest in any criminal investigation. She should have felt relieved. Instead, She felt empty. So I can leave. You can do whatever you want, but not go home. My apartment was cleaned out yesterday. Your belongings are in a storage unit in Naperville. Here's the key. He slid a small key across the desk. The unit is paid for 5 years. Everything you owned. Clothes, books, photos, your nursing certifications, personal documents. It's all there. Naomi picked up the key. Such a small thing to represent the sum total of her previous life. What about my job? Northwestern Memorial is holding your position. You're listed as on medical leave. Your supervisor believes you're recovering from injuries sustained during the home invasion. HR has been very understanding, especially after receiving documentation of your trauma from a very reputable psychologist. I haven't seen a psychologist. You have now. Dr. Sarah Williams. Excellent credentials. Very discreet. She's prepared to testify on your behalf if needed, though we don't anticipate it will be. This is insane. Naomi set down the key. You've thought of everything. It's what I do. No. What you do is control people. Situations. Outcomes. She met his gaze. You've spent 3 years building a file on me, learning everything about my life, planning for this moment. That's not protection. That's obsession. Perhaps. She'd expected denial. Defense. His calm acceptance threw her. You're not going to argue? Why would I? You're correct. He stood, moved to the window. I've been obsessed with you for 3 years, Miss Carter. Obsessed with the woman who saved a 16-year-old gang member despite being obviously injured. Obsessed with someone who could endure what you've endured and still show up to work, still smile at patients, still choose compassion over bitterness. That's not obsession. That's idealization. You don't know me. I know you take your coffee black with 1 sugar. I know you donate 10% of your paycheck to a Southside community clinic, despite your student loans. I know you cry during Pixar movies but not during horror films. I know you wanted to be a doctor but couldn't afford medical school. I know your mother died when you were 17 and your father. He stopped. I know more about you than anyone in your life except possibly your sister in Pilsen. Rosa. The name came out as a whisper. Have you been watching her too? Monitoring. Not watching. There's a difference. Yes, you keep saying that. She stood. But here's the thing I don't understand. If you've been so obsessed, if you've had all this power and resources and 3 years to act, why wait? Why let me suffer for 3 more years with Evan? Why not just deal with him directly? Because that would have made you a damsel, a victim I rescued without permission. He turned from the window. I wanted you to choose your own salvation. I wanted you to ask for help. I wanted you to have agency in your own rescue, even if that meant watching me get hurt. Yes, the honesty of it hit her harder than any lie would have. You're a monster, she said quietly. I've never claimed otherwise. No, you just wrap it up in philosophy about agency and choice. But the truth is, you watched me suffer because it fit your narrative better. You let Evan put his hands on me hundreds of times because you were waiting for the perfect dramatic moment. You're right. Stop saying that. Her voice rose. Stop being so calm. Stop acting like this is reasonable. Would you prefer I lie? Pretend I'm a good man doing this for noble reasons. He moved closer, not quite invading her space, but close enough that she had to tilt her head up to maintain eye contact. I'm not good, Miss Carter. I run an organization that trades in violence and fear. I've destroyed people for lesser crimes than what Cole committed against you. I've made decisions that cost lives. And yes, I watched you suffer for 3 years because I was waiting for you to give me permission to intervene in the specific way I wanted to intervene. Which is what? What exactly do you want from me? Everything. The word hung between them. I want you here, in this house. I want you safe. I want you to never have to check whether the man you love is in a good mood before you speak. I want you to take up space without apology. He paused. I want you to understand that you were never invisible. Not to me. Not for a single moment of those 3 years. Her throat felt tight. This isn't romance. This is control. It's both. I don't do things halfway. Remember, you're insane. Probably. Does that change what you want? I don't want this. Don't you? His gaze held hers. 3 days you've been here. You haven't tried to leave once. Haven't called your sister. Haven't contacted anyone from your old life. You've read books, used the gym, drunk wine that costs more than most people's rent, and slept through the night for the first time in years. So tell me, Naomi. Her name on his lips felt different, intimate in a way she wasn't ready for. If you don't want this, why are you still here? Because he was right. Because she'd slept through the night. Because nobody had made her feel small or scared or less than she was. Because for 3 days, she'd existed without fear. And the absence of fear felt so alien she'd mistaken it for happiness. This isn't real, she said finally. I'm just coming down from trauma. This is adrenaline, or Stockholm Syndrome, or you're finally somewhere safe enough to feel what you've been suppressing for years. He reached out, slowly enough that she could step back if she wanted. His hand touched her cheek, fingers gentle against the fading bruise there. You're allowed to want this. You're allowed to want safety, comfort, someone who sees you as more than a convenient punching bag. But what you want from me, I want you to stay. I want you to heal. And yes, eventually, I want you to look at me without fear or calculation. I want you to choose to be here, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because this is where you want to be. And if that never happens, then you have a very nice house on the lake, and I have the satisfaction of knowing you're safe. I can live with that. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe this was genuine and not just another form of possession, more sophisticated than Evan's fists, but ultimately the same game. But she'd learned to read men, to calculate their moods, predict their violence, survive their affection. Jun-Sok was either completely sincere or the best liar she'd ever encountered. She suspected it might be both. I need time, she said. You have it. He dropped his hand, stepped back. The distance felt colder than it should have. Stay as long as you want. The house is yours. Diane will provide anything you need. If you decide to leave, I'll help you relocate anywhere you choose. If you decide to stay, he paused. If you stay, we'll discuss what that means. What does it mean? That depends on you. He returned to his desk, opened his laptop. The dismissal was clear. She should have left, should have taken that opening and walked away. Instead, she asked, the 16-year-old, the one I saved 3 years ago, what happened to him? Jun-Sok looked up. Something shifted in his expression. He works for me now. College student at DePaul. Computer science. He'll graduate next year with no debt. You paid for his education. I invested in someone who survived because of you. He's brilliant with systems. Useful. Everything's transactional with you. Not everything, but most things. Yes. He met her gaze. Does that change what you want to know? She thought about it. No. I just wanted to know he was okay. He is. Because of you. And indirectly, because of me. These things connect, Miss Carter. We're all links in chains we don't see until something breaks. Or someone sends a text to the wrong number. Or that. She left the study feeling more confused than when she'd entered. Walked back to her room. When had she started thinking of it as hers? And stared out at the lake until the sun set, and the sky turned the color of bruises. Her phone, still off, sat on the nightstand. Her life, packed in a storage unit in Naperville, waited for her to reclaim it. Her future, undefined and terrifying, stretched ahead like dark water. And somewhere in this house, a man who'd watched her suffer for 3 years was continuing to work, to plan, to control outcomes, like pieces on a board she couldn't fully see. She should leave. She would leave, eventually, but not tonight. Tonight, she was going to take a bath in that enormous tub, drink more wine she couldn't afford, and sleep without fear. Tomorrow she would make decisions. Tomorrow she would be strong. Tonight, she was just going to let herself be safe, even if safety came with conditions she didn't fully understand, even if the man providing it was dangerous in ways Evan had never been, even if she was starting to suspect that wrong number had been exactly right all along. On day 7, Naomi turned her phone back on. The messages flooded in Jessica, her supervisor at Northwestern, her sister Rosa, several co-workers. even her landlord. She stared at the notifications, feeling the weight of obligation pressed down like a physical thing. She answered Jessica first. "I'm safe. I'm sorry I disappeared. I needed time. I'll explain when I can. Please don't worry." The response came within seconds. "Girl, where have you been? The police came to the hospital. They said you were involved in something with Evan. Are you okay? Where are you staying?" Naomi's fingers hovered over the keyboard. How did she explain any of this? "I'm okay. Evan and I are done. I'm staying with a friend. I'll be back to work soon." "What friend? You need to talk to me. This is crazy. Should I come get you?" "I'm fine, Jess. I promise. Just give me a little more time." She sent similar messages to others, carefully vague, offering reassurance without information. Then she called Rosa. Her sister answered on the first ring. "Naomi, oh my God, where have you been? I've been losing my mind. The police came here looking for you, and Evan called me 5 times, saying you'd been kidnapped by some—" "I'm fine." Naomi's voice was steadier than she felt. "I'm not kidnapped. I left Evan. I should have done it a long time ago." Rosa's voice dropped to a whisper. "Did he hurt you again?" "Yes, but I'm safe now. I'm staying somewhere he can't reach me." "Where?" "Naomi, you're scaring me. I can't explain everything yet, but I'm okay. Better than okay. I just need some time to figure things out." They talked for 20 minutes, Naomi deflecting questions, Rosa growing increasingly frustrated. Finally, her sister sighed. "You've never been a good liar. Whatever's happening, whatever you've gotten involved in, just be careful. Okay, and if you need me, call. Anytime. I will. I love you." "Love you too, Hermanita." After the call ended, Naomi sat with her phone in her hands, feeling the fragility of the lies she'd just told. She was safe. She wasn't kidnapped, but she also wasn't free. Not really. She was caught in something else entirely. A knock on her door interrupted her spiraling thoughts. "Come in." Diane entered with a garment bag. "Mr. Kang requested I bring this to you. He'd like you to join him for dinner this evening. 7 o'clock. The dining room." Naomi blinked. "Dinner?" "Yes, dear. Nothing formal. Just the two of you." Diane laid the garment bag on the bed. "He thought you might want something nice to wear. But of course, wear whatever you're comfortable in." After Diane left, Naomi unzipped the bag. Inside was a dress deep emerald silk, simple cut, obviously expensive. Her size, of course. Also her favorite color, a fact she'd only mentioned once to her mother years ago. The level of knowledge he had about her was unsettling. She should wear jeans, should refuse to play whatever game this was. She wore the dress. At 7 p.m., she descended the stairs, feeling like she was walking into something she couldn't name. The dining room was on the main floor, overlooking the lake through floor-to-ceiling windows. The table could seat 12 but was set for 2, intimate despite the space. Jun Sok stood when she entered. He'd changed 2 dark slacks, white shirt open at the collar, more relaxed than she'd seen him, almost human. "Thank you for joining me," he said. "Did I have a choice?" "Always. Though I'm glad you chose yes." He pulled out a chair for her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm in a very expensive cage." "Fair assessment." He took his own seat. "Would it help if I explained the bars are decorative?" "Are they?" He poured wine different from what she'd been drinking. Darker, richer. "You're not a prisoner, Naomi. You can leave whenever you want. I've been clear about that. But you'd prefer I stay." "Strongly prefer, yes." Diane appeared with the first course, something that looked like art on a plate. Then she disappeared, leaving them alone. They ate in silence for a few minutes. The food was exquisite, though Naomi barely tasted it. "I need to understand something," she said finally. "The kid I saved 3 years ago. That's really why you've been monitoring me." "That's when it started, yes. But why? People save lives every day. Nurses, doctors, paramedics. Why me?" Jun Sok set down his fork. "Because of what happened after. Do you remember?" She thought back. That night was a blur, the gunshot victim, the chaos, the desperate work to keep him alive. "Afterward, I collapsed," she said slowly. "In the hallway. Jessica helped me up. Before that, right after you stabilized him, His mother arrived. Do you remember what she said to you? Naomi shook her head. She grabbed your hand. She was crying, barely coherent. She asked if her son was going to make it. And you, he paused. You were exhausted, obviously injured. You'd just worked a miracle holding this kid together until the surgeons could take over. And she asked you if he'd make it. I don't remember this. You smiled at her. You said, he's strong. He'll fight. Then you walked away because you had 4 other patients waiting. You didn't promise her anything. You didn't offer false hope. You just gave her enough to breathe for the next few hours. That's what you say. Standard practice. Except you were lying. The kid had a 20% chance at best. You knew it. I could see it on your face when you talked to the surgical team. But you gave his mother hope anyway, because that's what she needed in that moment. I don't understand what that has to do with. That mother was dating one of my associates. I was there because he was there. I watched you work. I watched you lie to give someone peace. And then I watched you collapse and get back up and keep going. He took a sip of wine. People in my world don't do that. They don't sacrifice themselves for strangers. They don't lie to be kind. They don't get back up when they're obviously broken. So you decided to stalk me? I decided to understand you, to see if that moment was an aberration, or if you were genuinely that selfless. His gaze held hers. It wasn't an aberration. You're like that every day, every shift, every patient. You give everything you have to people who can't give you anything back. That's literally my job. No, your job is to provide medical care. Compassion is extra, especially when you're going home to someone who's systematically destroying you. The words hit harder because they were true. I couldn't save myself, she said quietly, but I could save them. I know. I watched you choose them over yourself for 3 years. Watched you drive through blizzards for extra shifts. Watched you cover for co-workers who needed time off. Watched you give everything to everyone except yourself. He leaned forward. That's when I knew. Knew what? That you were worth waiting for. That if I could give you just one chance, one opening to save yourself, you'd take it. And you did. You sent that text. You chose yourself. Finally. And I got to be the person who answered. This is insane, she whispered. Probably. But I've built my entire life on calculated insanity. Why stop now? Diane brought the second course. More food Naomi couldn't focus on. More wine she drank too quickly. You said you'd explain your world, she said after Diane left again. What you do. Who you are. Is that what you want to know? If I'm staying, if I'm even considering staying, I need to understand what I'm becoming part of. Junsok nodded slowly. Fair enough. What do you want to know? Everything. Start at the beginning. He refilled both their glasses. I was born in Seoul. My father ran a small import business, legitimate on paper, less so in practice. When I was 12, he moved us to Los Angeles. Better opportunities, he said. What he meant was less competition and more vulnerable territory. So you grew up in the family business. I grew up watching my father navigate 2 worlds. The legitimate face he showed at Chamber of Commerce meetings and the real work he did at night. He taught me that power isn't about violence. Violence is easy. Power is about knowing what people want and making sure they need you to get it. Sounds like control. It is. But mutually beneficial control. The businesses I work with, importers, manufacturers, real estate developers, they get access to markets and resources they couldn't reach otherwise. In return, they pay for that access. You mean protection money? Sometimes. Other times it's consultation fees, export facilitation, conflict resolution. Chicago is full of people who need problems solved without official documentation. Legal problems? All kinds. Business disputes, zoning issues, competitive advantages, immigration documentation, supply chain optimization. He shrugged. The line between legal and illegal is thinner than people think. I work in the space between. And the men you sent to get me? The team that extracted me from my apartment like some kind of military operation. Private security. Some former military. Some law enforcement. All carefully vetted and well compensated. They handle situations where official channels would be complicated. You mean they do illegal things? I mean, they handled delicate situations with discretion. Naomi laughed, but it came out bitter. You're talking around it. Say it clearly. You run a criminal organization. Yes. No hesitation this time. I run a syndicate with operations in 3 countries. We facilitate transactions that exist in legal gray areas. We provide services people need but can't access through legitimate channels. And yes, sometimes that involves violence, though less often than you'd think. But you've hurt people. I've authorized actions that resulted in harm, yes. People who threatened my operations, who violated agreements, who... He stopped. Yes, I've hurt people, directly and indirectly. Does that change what you want? She should say yes, should be horrified, should grab her things and run as far and fast as she could. Instead, she asked, the man who came for me, the kind one who guided me out of the apartment. What's his name? Marcus, former Marine, 3 tours in Afghanistan. He has a daughter in college at Northwestern. She wants to be a nurse. And the others? Why do you want to know? Because if I'm part of this, I want to understand who else is. I don't want them to be abstract. I want them to be real. Something shifted in his expression. Pride, maybe. James, tall, bald, used to play for the Bears before a knee injury. He runs our logistics. Sophie coordinates communications. You haven't met her, but she's the reason your phone works despite Cole trying to track you. Vincent handles financial operations. He's a genius with international banking regulations. You're describing a company. We are a company, just one that operates outside traditional oversight. And me? What am I in this company? Whatever you want to be. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have. He stood, walked to the window. I want you here, Naomi. I want you safe and healing, and eventually happy. What form that takes. What role you choose to play, that's your decision. What if I want to go back to nursing? Then we'll ensure you can do that safely. Different hospital, maybe. Different city if needed. Whatever keeps Cole away from you. What if I want nothing to do with your world? Then you'll have a house and an income and freedom to live your life. I meant what I said. This isn't conditional on you becoming someone you're not. But you want more than that. Yes. What? He turned from the window. I want you to look at me and see more than the monster who watched you suffer. I want you to understand that waiting wasn't sadism. It was respect. I want you to choose this life because it's what you want, not because you have nowhere else to go. And if I never want that, then I'll be disappointed. But you'll still be safe. That was always the only thing that mattered. They stared at each other across the dining room. Outside, the sun set over Lake Michigan, painting the water in shades of gold and red. Inside, 2 people who'd never properly met danced around truths too large to name. Finally, Naomi spoke. I need to see it. See what? Your world. The business. Whatever this is, I need to understand what I'm saying yes to. That could be dangerous. I'm already in danger. At least this way, I'll know what I'm dealing with. Junsok studied her for a long moment, then nodded. All right. Tomorrow night. I have a meeting in the city, nothing violent. Just business. You can observe. See what my world actually looks like when it's not staging dramatic rescues. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You might not like what you see. After dinner, she returned to her room feeling full and exhausted and more confused than ever. The dress whispered against her skin as she changed into comfortable clothes. She hung it carefully, knowing she'd probably never wear it again but unable to throw it away. Her phone buzzed. Jessica again. Your supervisor called me. Said you're taking extended leave. Are you sure you're okay? I'm sure. I just need time. Evan's been asking about you. I told him to fuck off. Just so you know. Naomi smiled despite herself. Thank you. You're a good friend. I'm a friend who's worried. Call me when you're ready to talk. Really talk. I will. Promise. She set down her phone and looked out at the lake. Somewhere in Chicago, Evan was dealing with the collapse of his carefully constructed life. Somewhere in this house, Junsok was probably working, planning, controlling outcomes she couldn't see, and somewhere in between, Naomi Carter was trying to figure out who she was when she wasn't defined by the men around her. Tomorrow she'd see his world. Tomorrow she'd decide if she could live in it. Tonight, she just sat by the window and watched the water until sleep finally claimed her. Safe. For now. That was enough. The meeting was in a restaurant in the West Loop, Randolph Street, where Chicago's money people gathered to discuss business over plates that cost more than Naomi used to spend on groceries in a week. Marcus drove them in one of the black SUVs. Naomi sat beside Junsok in the back, hyper-aware of the space between them, the way his presence seemed to fill the vehicle despite his stillness. "Ground rules," he said as they crossed into the city. "You observe. You don't speak unless spoken to directly. If something feels wrong, you tell me immediately. If I tell you to leave, you leave without question. You think something might go wrong? I always prepare for things to go wrong. It's why they rarely do." The restaurant was called Astor, the kind of place where reservations required weeks of advance notice, and the dress code was enforced without apology. They were escorted to a private room in the back, soundproofed, Marcus had explained, for client privacy. 3 men waited inside. 2 were white, middle-aged, expensive suits that screamed corporate. The third was younger, Asian, watchful in the way people got when they'd learned early that inattention meant death. Junsok, the older white man, stood, extending a hand. "Good to see you, Richard. Thank you for making time." Junsok shook his hand, then gestured to Naomi. "This is Miss Carter. She's observing tonight." Richard's gaze flicked to her, assessment and dismissal, in a single glance. Of course, they sat. Diane, who'd apparently accompanied them though Naomi hadn't seen her in the SUV, appeared with wine. Then she vanished, leaving 5 people around a table to discuss what Naomi quickly realized was money laundering. They didn't call it that, of course. They talked about international investments and export facilitation and consulting fees. But as the conversation progressed, the reality became clear. Richard's company was moving money through a complex chain of shell corporations, using Junsok's contacts in Seoul and Los Angeles to make the transfers appear legitimate. The younger Asian man, introduced only as David, questioned some of the fees. Junsok explained the costs with the patience of someone who'd made this pitch 100 times. Risk mitigation, political insurance, documentation that would hold up to casual scrutiny while vanishing under serious investigation. "The beauty of our system," Junsok said, "is that every transaction looks boring. No red flags, no suspicious patterns, just routine international business between established companies." "And if it's audited?" Richard asked. "Then you have a legitimate paper trail showing arm's-length transactions with properly documented entities. The auditors will find nothing because there's nothing to find on paper. But in reality, you're moving money you can't officially move through channels that technically don't exist." Junsok's tone was matter-of-fact. "That's what you're paying for." The conversation continued for 90 minutes. Naomi sat silently, watching Junsok work. He was different here, still controlled, but with an edge of performance. He knew exactly when to be reassuring, when to be firm, when to let silence do the negotiating. Finally, Richard nodded. "We're in. Send the documentation to my attorney. We'll have transfers initiated by Friday." "Excellent." Junsok stood, shook hands again. "Pleasure doing business with you." They left through a back exit, Marcus appearing from somewhere to guide them to the waiting SUV. Inside, Junsok loosened his tie and turned to her. "Thoughts?" "That was a felony," Naomi said. "Several, technically. And you just conduct business like it's normal. Because it is normal. This is how the world works when you look past the official narratives. Richard's company needs to move money without triggering Treasury Department oversight. I facilitate that. Everyone gets what they want. Except the government that's being defrauded. The government that pretends money doesn't flow exactly like this every day." Junsok smiled without humor. "Come on, Naomi. You're smarter than that. This is Chicago. Money has always moved through unofficial channels." She wanted to argue, wanted to be horrified, but part of her, the part that had watched Evan's police connections make her complaints disappear, the part that had learned early that official systems failed, people like her, that part understood. The world wasn't fair. Power didn't follow the rules it made others follow. And sometimes Survival meant working within the system as it actually existed, not as it pretended to be. "What happens to Richard if he's caught?" she asked. "He won't be. We're careful. But hypothetically?" Jun-sok shrugged. "He has lawyers better than most federal prosecutors. He'd fight it for years. Probably settle for a fine that costs less than the profits he's made. That's how this works. And you? I have layers of insulation. David, the younger man you saw, he's technically my employee, but operates independently. If something goes wrong, it stops with him. I'm never directly connected to the transactions. You'd throw him under the bus. I'd compensate him handsomely for his silence and ensure his family was cared for. But yes, if necessary, he's expendable. That's the business." The casual ruthlessness of it chilled her. "You're thinking I'm a monster again," Jun-sok said. "Am I wrong? No. But I'm a monster who protects his people. David knows the risks. He's compensated accordingly. His daughter is at Stanford, on a scholarship that I'm quietly funding. His mother receives excellent medical care that his salary technically can't afford. If he goes down, his family won't suffer. That's the deal. Doesn't make it right. No. But it makes it honest, which is more than most employers offer." They rode in silence for a while, Chicago's lights streaming past the tinted windows. Naomi thought about Richard, about David, about the web of transactions that kept money flowing in directions it wasn't supposed to go. She thought about how different this was from Evan's violence, more sophisticated, more civilized, but ultimately the same game. Power, taking what it wanted, and justifying it afterward. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then something made her swipe to accept. "Hello? Naomi." Evan's voice. "We need to talk." Her blood went cold. "How did you get this number?" "I'm a detective. Remember? Finding people is what I do." His tone was calm, conversational, the way he sounded when he was planning something. "I know you're with him. Your Korean sugar daddy. I know where you're staying." Jun-sok's expression hardened. He'd heard the voice through her phone. "Evan, don't what? Try to protect you from a criminal? Try to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life?" He laughed. "Naomi, baby, I know you're scared. I know I messed up. But this guy you're with, he's dangerous. Not like me, I lost my temper. He's something else entirely. Come home. Let me help you." "I am home." "That's not your home. That's a cage. A pretty cage, sure. But you're still a prisoner. I was a prisoner with you. This is different." "Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, you've just traded one controlling man for another. At least I loved you. He's using you." Before Naomi could respond, Jun-sok took the phone from her hand. "Detective Cole." His voice was ice. "This is your only warning. If you contact Miss Carter again, if you attempt to approach her, if you so much as speak her name in public, the evidence I've been sitting on becomes very public. Do you understand? Listen. You piece of... No, you listen. I have documentation of every time you've assaulted a woman over the past decade. I have testimony from victims you thought you'd silenced. I have proof of evidence tampering, of threats made to witnesses, of your captain's knowledge and complicity, all of it ready to go to federal prosecutors, the media, and the disciplinary board simultaneously. You're bluffing. Call my bluff. Please. I would love to watch your career immolate." Jun-sok's tone hadn't changed. Still calm, still controlled. "Or you can walk away. Take your leave of absence. Get the therapy you clearly need. Find a nice suburb and a nice girl who doesn't know your history. Live out your life quietly. That's the offer. Silence on the other end." "Naomi deserves better than you," Evan finally said. "Both of you. She doesn't understand what you are, but she will. And when she does, when she realizes you're worse than I ever was, she'll have nowhere to go, because you'll have taken everything from her. That's what people like you do. People like me keep her safe. From people like you." Jun-sok ended the call, turned off Naomi's phone entirely, and handed it back to her. "I apologize. I should have had this number better secured. How did he find me?" "Multiple possibilities. He has law enforcement resources, contacts in places I don't fully control. It doesn't matter. Marcus, Sir, run the traces. Find how he got the number. And make sure he understands that call was a mistake. Understood. Naomi's hands were shaking. What does that mean? Make sure he understands. It means he's going to have a very uncomfortable conversation with some colleagues about appropriate professional boundaries. Nothing violent, just uncomfortable. You're escalating. He escalated. I'm responding. By threatening him. By protecting you. There's a difference. Was there? Naomi couldn't tell anymore. Everything in her life had become a gradient of control. Each man claiming his version was better, kinder, more justified. I want to see Rosa, she said abruptly. Junsok nodded. Of course. Tomorrow? We can arrange it safely. No. Tonight. Now. I need to see someone who isn't part of this world. Who isn't? She stopped. Please. He studied her for a moment, then nodded to Marcus. Pilsen. The sister's address is in the file. 20 minutes later, they pulled up outside Rosa's building, a converted industrial space that her sister rented with 3 roommates. All artists. All perpetually broke but happy. Naomi hadn't been here in months. Evan had discouraged it. Said the neighborhood was dangerous. That Rosa was a bad influence. The building that had actually been dangerous was the one she'd shared with him. I'll wait here, Junsok said. Take as long as you need. Naomi climbed out. The night air smelled like the Chicago she remembered, exhaust and food trucks and possibility. She climbed the 3 flights to Rosa's apartment. Knocked. Her sister opened the door, took one look at her, and pulled her into a fierce hug. You look different, Rosa said when they finally separated. Different how? Less broken. Still scared, but less. Small. Rosa guided her inside. The apartment was chaos as always, canvases everywhere, music playing, someone cooking something that smelled amazing in the kitchen. Who's in the scary black car downstairs? That's complicated. The guy you're staying with? Yes. Rosa poured wine, cheap stuff. The kind they used to split when Naomi first moved to Chicago, and money was impossibly tight. They sat on the couch that had seen better days, surrounded by the comfortable disorder of Rosa's life. Tell me everything, Rosa said. So Naomi did. Edited version, but still honest. The text, the extraction, the house on the lake, Junsok's world, his resources, his confession that he'd been watching her for years. Rosa listened without interrupting. When Naomi finished, her sister was quiet for a long moment. You know this is insane, right? Rosa finally said. Yes. And you know this man is dangerous. Like actually dangerous. Not Evan dangerous. Evan was a violent asshole. This guy sounds like he has people who make violent assholes disappear. I know. And you're still there because I'm safe. The words came out smaller than Naomi intended. For the first time in 2 years, I'm actually safe. But at what cost? I don't know yet. Rosa took her hand. I love you, Hermanita. And I'm glad you're away from Evan. But this isn't escape. This is just a different kind of trap. Maybe. But it's a trap I chose. That has to count for something. Does it? If you're choosing to lock yourself in, is that really choice? Naomi didn't have an answer for that. They talked for 2 more hours about nothing. About everything. About their childhood in the South Side, before their mother died. Before the world got complicated. Rosa made her laugh. Made her remember who she'd been before Evan. Before fear became her constant companion. Finally, around midnight, Naomi stood to leave. You can stay, Rosa offered. Right now. Walk away from all of it. Stay here, on my terrible couch, until we figure out something better. And Evan? We'll handle him. Get a restraining order. Move if we have to. Together, like we used to. It was tempting. God, it was tempting. To slip back into the simplicity of sisterhood, of fighting through problems with the only person who'd always been in her corner. But Evan wouldn't stop, and Rosa couldn't protect her the way Junsok could. I can't, Naomi said quietly. Not yet, but thank you for the offer. It stands. Always. Rosa hugged her again. Be careful, and don't forget who you are just because some man tells you you're safe. Downstairs, Marcus opened the SUV door. Junsok looked up from his phone. Everything okay? Yes. Thank you for waiting. They drove back in silence. Chicago's lights faded behind them as they headed north to the lake house. Naomi stared out the window, Rosa's words echoing. Don't forget who you are. But who was she? The trauma nurse who saved gang members. The woman who'd endured 2 years of violence without leaving. The accidental texted who'd asked a stranger for help. Or someone new entirely, someone she was still becoming in the spaces between fear and safety. Back at the house, she went straight to her room. Stood at the window looking at the lake. Her phone, still off, sat on the nightstand. Tomorrow, she'd turn it back on. Tomorrow, she'd deal with Evan's threats and whatever June-Sok was planning. But tonight, she just stood at the window and tried to remember what freedom felt like before it got tangled up with protection. Before safety became just another word for control. Before the wrong number became the right one. For better or worse. The gym was in the basement, a space Naomi had visited only once before. It was larger than she remembered. Professional equipment, mirrored walls. A corner set up for what looked disturbingly like combat training. That was where she found June-Sok at 6 a.m., moving through forms that flowed like water, each movement precise and deadly. She watched from the doorway, unwilling to interrupt. He was shirtless, and she could see now what the expensive suits hid: scars, old ones, long healed, but telling a story of violence survived. He noticed her but didn't stop, completed the sequence, then turned. Couldn't sleep? I never sleep anymore. Not really. She stepped into the gym. Teach me. Teach you what? How to be dangerous. June-Sok picked up a towel, wiped his face. Why? Because Rosa was right. I've been trading one cage for another. With Evan, I was helpless. Here, I'm protected. But protection is just another word for dependent. I'm tired of being something that needs protecting. I want to be something that protects itself. He studied her for a long moment. This isn't a movie montage, Naomi. Learning to defend yourself takes years of training, constant practice. I can teach you basics, but you won't become a fighter overnight. So teach me the basics. Teach me enough that next time a man puts his hands on me, I can make him regret it. The best self-defense is avoiding situations where you need to defend yourself. I tried that. It didn't work. Evan found me anyway. Men like him always do. So either I learn to fight back, or I spend my life running. Those are the options, right? So teach me option 3. Which is? Stand and win. Something shifted in his expression. Respect, maybe. All right. But we do this my way. No ego, no movie dramatics. Just practical techniques that work against larger, stronger opponents. Agreed? Agreed. They started with basics. How to fall without injury. How to protect your head. How to use an attacker's momentum against them. June-Sok was a patient teacher, correcting her form without judgment, demonstrating each technique slowly before having her practice. The goal isn't to win a fight, he explained. The goal is to create an opening to escape. You strike vulnerable points, eyes, throat, groin, and then you run. Pride doesn't matter. Survival does. What if I can't run? Then you continue striking until you can. The throat is easiest, a hard blow there, and even a large man will struggle to breathe. But you have to commit. Half-hearted strikes just make an attacker angry. They practiced for 2 hours. By the end, Naomi was exhausted and sore, but she'd learned how to break a grab, how to strike effectively, how to use her smaller size as an advantage rather than a weakness. Tomorrow, same time? June-Sok asked as she headed for the door. Yes. And June-Sok? Yes? Thank you for taking me seriously. You've always been serious, Naomi. The world just trained you to make yourself small. I'm glad you're remembering how to be big. The training became routine. Every morning at 6, 2 hours in the gym. Then breakfast, with whatever business June-Sok was conducting that day. Afternoons were hers, she read, walked the grounds, occasionally sat in on June-Sok's meetings when they seemed relevant. She learned the rhythms of his world, the phone calls that happened at odd hours, connecting to Seoul or Los Angeles or New York, the visitors who came and went, all carefully vetted, all treating Jun-sok with the deference given to men who held power that didn't come from official titles. She learned about his operations too, not just the money laundering but the legitimate businesses that provided cover. Real estate holdings throughout Chicago, import companies that brought in Korean goods, investment funds that moved money through international markets. The illegal stuff funds the legal stuff, which funds more illegal stuff, Jun-sok explained one afternoon in his study. It's a cycle. Eventually, you become so entrenched in legitimate business that the illegal operations become unnecessary. That's the goal. Respectability. And you're close. Closer than my father ever got. Another 5 years, maybe less, and we'll be almost entirely legitimate. Almost. What keeps you in the illegal work? Loyalty. People who've been with me for years, who depend on those operations for income. I won't cut them loose just to satisfy societal norms about how money should flow. So you're a criminal with principles. I'm a businessman who understands that loyalty matters more than legality. It was a strange education, learning to see the world the way Jun-sok saw it, not as right or wrong, but as functional or dysfunctional, sustainable or self-destructing. She found herself, against all logic, beginning to understand his perspective. But understanding wasn't the same as accepting. On the 14th day of her stay, Evan appeared on the news. Naomi was having coffee in the kitchen when Diane turned on the television. The local news was covering a press conference. Evan, in a suit, looking haggard but composed, standing beside his attorney. I want to address recent allegations, he said to the cameras. 3 years ago, I was involved in a relationship that became unhealthy. I made mistakes. I lost control of my temper. I've spent the time since then in therapy, working on the issues that led to my behavior. I'm not asking for forgiveness. What I did was wrong, but I want to take responsibility and move forward. The attorney took over, explaining that Evan was voluntarily resigning from CPD, that he was seeking treatment, that this was about taking accountability. Naomi watched numbly. He looked sincere. He'd always been good at that, looking sincere while lying through his teeth. This is bullshit, Diane muttered. Sorry, dear, but this is grade A manipulation. I know. Naomi turned off the TV. Where's Jun-sok? Conference call in his study. Naomi walked upstairs without knocking. Jun-sok was indeed on a call, speaking rapid Korean. He saw her, held up one finger, then wrapped up the conversation. You saw the press conference, he said. Is that your doing? Partially. His attorney recommended the public accountability angle. Makes him look self-aware and contrite. Kills some of the momentum from the internal affairs investigation. So he gets to walk away, resign quietly, play the recovery card, and that's it, for now. But the civil suits are still coming. The victims I found are still prepared to testify. This press conference doesn't make him immune. It just changes the narrative. He looked sincere. He always does. That's what makes him dangerous. Jun-sok gestured to a chair. Sit. Tell me what you're thinking. Naomi sat. I'm thinking that if I hadn't sent that wrong number text, Evan would still be hitting me. He'd still be a cop with a spotless record, and I'd probably be dead by now or wishing I was. Probably. And I'm thinking that you orchestrated all of this. The extraction, the evidence gathering, the pressure on his career. You've been planning this for 3 years. Yes. Why? I told you. Because you asked for help. Because I was waiting for you to ask. But before I asked, you did nothing. You watched him hurt me for 3 years, and did nothing. Because anything I did without your consent would have been another man taking away your agency. I couldn't save you, Naomi. Only you could do that. I just made sure that when you reached out, someone was there to catch you. She wanted to be angry, wanted to rage at him for the calculus that had kept her in danger for years. But she couldn't, because he was right. If he'd intervened 3 years ago, she would have been saved. But she wouldn't have saved herself, and the difference mattered. Evan was right about one thing, she said quietly. What's that? You are dangerous. Maybe more dangerous than he ever was. Yes, but you're dangerous in a different way. Evan's danger was random, unpredictable. Yours is calculated, precise. You don't lose control. You exert it. Is that better or worse? I don't know yet. She met his gaze. I don't know if you saved me, or if you're just a more sophisticated cage. There's only one way to find out, which is, test it. Push back. See what happens when you refuse me. See if the cage is real, or if it's just in your head. You want me to refuse you. I want you to have the freedom to refuse me. Real freedom, not theoretical. Try it. Tell me no. Test the boundaries. See if they hold. It was the strangest invitation she'd ever received. That evening, she did exactly that. Jun Sok had a business dinner planned, another meeting like the one she'd observed, this time with contacts from Los Angeles. He'd assumed she'd attend. I'm not going, she said. He looked up from his phone. May I ask why? Because I don't want to. Because I'm tired of watching you conduct business that makes me complicit in crimes I don't approve of. Because I need a night to myself. A pause. Then, all right. Would you like Diane to prepare dinner here? Or would you prefer to order in? That's it? No argument? Why would I argue? You don't want to go. You're not going. Your choice. But you want me there. My preference is irrelevant to your choice. He stood, adjusted his tie. Enjoy your evening. I'll be back around 11. He left. Naomi stood in the empty study, feeling oddly deflated. She'd expected pushback, negotiation, some form of resistance. Instead, he just accepted her decision. She tested it again the next day, refused to train in the morning, spent the day in her room, avoided dinner. Jun Suk never mentioned it, never asked why, just adjusted his routine around her absence. On the third day, she confronted him. Why aren't you asking me what's wrong? Because nothing's wrong. You're establishing boundaries. That's healthy. But don't you want to know why? Only if you want to tell me. This isn't how people work. When someone withdraws, you're supposed to ask what's happening. You're supposed to care. I do care. But caring doesn't mean forcing you to explain yourself. He looked at her over his coffee. You're testing whether the cage is real, whether I'll trap you when you try to move independently. So far, what have you learned? She didn't have an answer, because the cage, if it existed, was one she couldn't see. No bars, no locks, no obvious constraints, just a man who gave her space when she demanded it, and who seemed content to let her figure out her own boundaries, which was somehow more unsettling than if he'd pushed back. I hate this, she said finally. Hate what? That you're right. That you give me exactly the freedom you promised. That the cage might not be real. Which means the only thing keeping me here is my own choice. Is that so terrible? Yes. Because if I'm choosing to stay, then I'm responsible. I can't blame you for trapping me. I can't be a victim. I have to own this decision. Welcome to agency, Naomi. It's uncomfortable, but it's yours. She left the kitchen, went back to her room, and for the first time in 2 weeks, she cried. Not from fear, not from pain, but from the overwhelming weight of actually having control over her life again, of being responsible for her choices, of having to decide who she wanted to be instead of just surviving who she was. That night, she joined Jun Sok for dinner, not because he asked, because she chose to. And that, she realized, made all the difference. 3 weeks after the text that changed everything, Naomi attended her first public event as Jun Sok's. What? Companion? Associate? They'd never defined it. The event was a charity gala at the Art Institute of Chicago, $1,000 per plate fundraiser for youth programs in underserved communities. Jun Sok had bought an entire table. Why are we going to this? Naomi asked, as Diane helped her into a gown that probably cost more than she used to make in a month. Because I donate to several children's charities. It's good for business and good for the community. Both can be true. He appeared in the doorway, already dressed in a tuxedo that made him look like he belonged on a movie poster. Also, because Detective Cole will be there. Naomi froze. What? His family is a major donor. His father sits on the board. He'll be there despite his resignation. Family obligations trump personal scandal in their circles. And you want me to see him? I want him to see you. See you safe, healthy, thriving. I want him to understand that you're not someone he can reach anymore. This is bait. This is a message. What if he approaches me? Then Marcus and 3 other members of my security team who'll be present will ensure the conversation stays civil. But I don't think he will. Men like Cole are cowards. They only attack when they have overwhelming advantage. In a room full of witnesses, with security present, he'll keep his distance. You're very confident about that. I've been studying him for 3 years. I know how he thinks. The gala was in the museum's modern wing, a space of glass and light overlooking Millennium Park. 200 people in evening wear, drinking champagne, discussing art and politics with the practiced ease of Chicago's elite. Naomi felt out of place immediately, but Jun-Sok guided her through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged everywhere. He introduced her as Miss Carter, a trauma nurse at Northwestern, and watched as people's expressions shifted surprise that he was dating someone with an actual job, curiosity about how they'd met, calculation about what this said about his standing. "You're enjoying this," she murmured as they moved to their table. "Immensely. You're disrupting their expectations. They can't figure out how a nurse from the South Side ended up with me. It's killing them. Maybe because it doesn't make sense. Or maybe because they're too small-minded to imagine relationships that aren't transactional." Their table included Sophie, the communications coordinator she'd heard about but never met, elegant in blue, brilliant and sharp, and Vincent, the financial operator, older, distinguished, accompanied by his husband. Also Marcus, surprisingly graceful in formal wear, and 2 others from Jun-Sok's organization she didn't know. "So you're the famous wrong number," Sophie said with a smile. "I've been dying to meet you." "Famous? You have no idea how rare it is for Jun-Sok to mobilize the way he did for you. We've been taking bets on when he'd make his move. I had 3 years. I win." "Sophie," Jun-Sok said mildly. "What? She should know she's special. She broke your legendary control." Dinner was announced. They moved to their table. The food was excellent. The conversation varied art, politics, the challenges facing Chicago's south and west sides, Vincent's upcoming trip to Geneva. Naomi found herself relaxing despite the circumstance. These people weren't what she expected. They were smart, funny, genuinely interested in the charity's mission. They happened to also run a criminal enterprise, but they compartmentalized effectively. Then she saw Evan. He was across the room at a table with his family, parents, younger sister, an uncle who was a state senator. He looked better than he had at the press conference. Still thin, still haggard, but composed, sober. Their eyes met across the crowded room. She expected rage, expected him to stand, make a scene, do something characteristic of the man who'd terrorized her. Instead, he just looked sad, broken. He lifted his champagne glass slightly. A toast, an acknowledgement. Then he turned away, returning to his conversation. "That's new," Jun-Sok murmured beside her. "What is the sad act?" He's pivoting from denying accountability to embracing the wounded veteran angle. Smart. People forgive broken men more easily than angry ones. You think it's an act? Everything with him is an act. The only question is whether he believes his own performance. The dinner continued. Speeches were made about the importance of youth programs, the power of community investment, Chicago's resilience. People applauded at the appropriate moments, donated generously, felt good about themselves, while drinking wine that cost more than most families' grocery budgets. Naomi hated it and understood it simultaneously. During the dessert course, Evan's father approached their table. He was tall, silver-haired, with the kind of face that looked trustworthy on television. Richard Cole, Sr., former assistant state's attorney, current chairman of 3 non-profit boards. "Mr. Kang," he said with a practiced smile. "I wanted to introduce myself. Richard Cole." Jun-Sok stood, shook his hand. "Of course. Your son was recently in the news. An unfortunate situation. Family issues, as I'm sure you understand. But he's getting help. We're all very proud of his courage in taking accountability." Accountability. Interesting word for resigning before he's fired. Richard's smile tightened. "I don't believe we have any quarrel, Mr. Kang. You've built an impressive operation here in Chicago. My family has deep roots in this city. I'd hate for there to be unnecessary conflict between us. Then I suggest your son continue to stay away from Miss Carter. Jun-sok's tone was pleasant, his smile warm. Only his eyes betrayed the threat beneath. As long as he does, we'll have no conflict whatsoever. My son is focused on his recovery. I'm sure there's no need for Mr. Cole. Jun, continue. 8:03 a.m. Seok's voice didn't rise, but something in it made Richard stop mid-sentence. Your son spent 2 years beating the woman sitting next to me. He broke her ribs, gave her concussions, destroyed her sense of safety. You and I both know he did the same to at least 3 women before her. So, let's not pretend this is a minor family issue that requires only polite deflection. The table had gone quiet. People at nearby tables were pretending not to listen while clearly listening. Richard's face reddened. I won't be spoken to like, then walk away. That's your choice. But understand that if your son approaches Miss Carter, if he contacts her, if he so much as speaks her name in public, the evidence I have of his crimes and your family's efforts to cover them up will become very public. Do we understand each other? Richard looked at Naomi. She met his gaze, refused to look away. This city has a long memory, Richard said quietly. You're making enemies. I'm protecting what's mine. If that makes me enemies, so be it. Richard walked away without another word. The table remained silent for a moment. Then Vincent laughed. Well, that was subtle. He came to my table. I was simply direct. Jun-sok sat back down. Are you all right? He asked Naomi. Yes, but you just declared war on one of Chicago's most powerful families. No, I defended you from someone who thought his connections made him untouchable. There's a difference. After dinner, people mingled, networking and making connections. Naomi found herself separated from Jun-sok, cornered by a group of older women who wanted to know everything about her relationship, her background, whether she understood what kind of man she was involved with. She deflected politely until Marcus materialized at her elbow. Miss Carter, Mr. Kang would like a word. She excused herself gratefully. Marcus guided her not to Jun-sok, but to a quiet corner of the gallery. What's happening? Detective Cole is approaching. Mr. Kang wanted you removed from the situation before it develops. I thought you said he wouldn't. Drunk people do unpredictable things. He's had 6 glasses of champagne in 40 minutes. Through the crowd, Naomi saw Evan making his way toward where Jun-sok stood with Sophie and Vincent. His father tried to stop him. Evan pushed past. She should have looked away, should have let Marcus guide her to safety. Instead, she watched. Evan reached Jun-sok, said something she couldn't hear from this distance. Jun-sok's expression didn't change. Then Evan's hand shot out, grabbing Jun-sok's lapel. Security moved immediately, both museum security and Jun-sok's team. But Jun-sok was faster. One moment, Evan was grabbing him. The next, Evan was on the floor, Jun-sok's hand around his wrist, applying pressure to a point that clearly hurt. Touch me again, and you'll leave in an ambulance, Jun-sok said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. Miss Carter made it clear she doesn't want you dead. I suggest you stop testing her generosity. He released Evan, stood, adjusted his tuxedo. Security, both types, surrounded Evan. His father rushed over, mortified and angry. The whole room was watching now. Conversation stopped, the spectacle complete. Jun-sok walked calmly to Naomi. We're leaving, he said simply. They made their exit with dignity, Marcus and the others forming a protective wall. The SUV was waiting. They left the gala and Chicago's elite behind, heading north to the lake. In the vehicle, Naomi was shaking not from fear, from adrenaline. That was insane, she finally said. That was necessary. He needed to understand that you're off limits. Now he does. You humiliated him. I defended myself from assault. He grabbed me. I responded proportionally. There will be consequences. Let them come. Jun-sok loosened his bow tie. The Cole family will do damage control. Claim Evan was drunk and emotional, that I overreacted, that this is all a misunderstanding. But everyone in that room saw what happened. They saw him grab me. They saw him lose. That matters more than whatever story his family spins. You're not worried? About the Coles? No. They're powerful in traditional circles. Politics, law, old money connections. But they have no real teeth. They can't touch me without exposing themselves. It's mutually assured destruction. And they know it. Back at the house, Naomi went straight to her room, still in the gown, still shaking. She couldn't process what had just happened. The public confrontation, Jun-sok's calm violence, the way he'd simply broken Evan like it was easy. A knock on her door. "Come in." Jun-sok entered, jacket off, shirt partially unbuttoned. He looked tired for the first time since she'd met him. "Are you all right?" he asked. "I don't know. I should be upset. Seeing Evan like that, broken and drunk, should make me feel something. But I just feel empty. That's normal. You've spent so much energy being afraid of him that, now that he's clearly defeated, there's nothing left. Will he try again? No. He's done. What happened tonight broke whatever illusion he had about being untouchable. He'll spiral drinking, maybe drugs, definitely therapy he doesn't actually engage with. Eventually, his family will send him somewhere quiet to fade away. He's no longer your problem. And the evidence you have, the victims you found, still ready to go public if needed, but I don't think it will be necessary. He's neutered himself." Naomi sat on the edge of her bed. "Thank you." "For what?" "For making me safe. For ending it. You ended it. When you sent that text, I just provided the tools." He turned to leave. She stopped him. "Stay. For a minute. I don't want to be alone right now." He sat in the chair by the window. They existed in silence for a while. Lake Michigan, dark beyond the glass. "When I was 17, Naomi said quietly, "my mother got sick. Cancer. We didn't have insurance. She tried to tough it out, thought it would pass. By the time we got her to a hospital, it was too late. She died 3 weeks later. I'm sorry. That's when I decided to be a nurse, so other people wouldn't die because they couldn't afford help. So I could be the person who showed up when everyone else looked away." She looked at him. "That's who I thought I was. The person who helped. But I couldn't help myself. I couldn't save myself from Evan. I just kept going back, kept believing he'd change, kept thinking I could fix him if I was just good enough. You couldn't have fixed him. Some people are broken in ways that love can't repair. I know that now. But it cost me 2 years of my life to learn it. Those 2 years weren't wasted. They taught you what you won't accept anymore. They brought you here. Is here where I'm supposed to be? That's your decision. But yes, I think so. I think you were always meant to be somewhere you're valued instead of diminished. Whether that's here or somewhere else, that's your choice." They sat in the quiet until exhaustion pulled Naomi towards sleep. Jun-seok stood, moved toward the door. "Jun-seok?" "Yes?" "I'm glad it was you. The wrong number. I'm glad it was someone who understood. So am I. Sleep well, Naomi." He left. She changed out of the gown, climbed into bed, and for the first time since this all began, she didn't dream of Evan. She dreamed of possibility, of what came next, of who she might become, now that she was finally free. The video hit social media at 9 a.m. the next morning. Someone at the gala had filmed the confrontation. Evan grabbing Jun-sok, the takedown, the threat delivered in Jun-sok's calm, controlled voice. Within 3 hours, it had 6 million views. By noon, every news outlet in Chicago was running the story. Former CPD detective Evan Cole, who recently resigned amid controversy, was involved in an altercation at a charity gala last night, the anchors reported. Cole allegedly assaulted businessman Kang Jun-sok, who was attending with trauma nurse Naomi Carter, reportedly Cole's former fiancée. The incident has raised new questions about Cole's resignation and previous allegations of domestic violence. Naomi watched from the living room as her life became public property. They used her nursing school photo. She looked so young in it, so hopeful. They used Evan's police photo, looking professional and trustworthy. They used grainy smartphone footage of the gala. Evan on the ground, Jun-sok standing over him. The narrative was forming in real time. Decorated detective, tragic fall, the beautiful nurse who got away, the mysterious foreign businessman. It was a story, and people loved stories. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Jessica, Rosa, co-workers from the hospital, reporters who'd somehow gotten her number. She turned it off again. "I'm sorry," Jun-sok said, standing in the doorway. "I didn't anticipate the video going viral." "You didn't anticipate someone filming it? At a public event?" "I anticipated filming. I didn't anticipate it spreading this fast." He sat beside her. "Your anonymity is gone. That changes things." "Changes how?" "People know your name now. They know you're associated with me. That makes you a target for media, for rivals, for anyone looking to leverage connections to me. It means you'll need security when you leave this house. It means privacy becomes complicated. I didn't ask for this." "No, but it's what we have now. The question is what we do with it." Naomi thought about it, about the video, the coverage, the way her story was being told, without her input. "I want to tell my version," she said, "of what happened with Evan. All of it. The abuse, the escape, how I ended up here. If my story is going to be public, I want to control the narrative. That's dangerous. Revealing details about our relationship, about how we met, it exposes both of us. Or it gets ahead of the story. Right now, people are speculating. They're creating fiction about who we are and how this happened. If I speak first, we control what they believe." Jun-sok was quiet for a moment. "You're right, but are you ready for that? Once you speak publicly, there's no taking it back. Everything you say will be analyzed, questioned, used against you. Better than silence. Silence is what Evan used to control me. I'm done being silent." By afternoon, Sophie had arranged an interview with a respected journalist from the Chicago Tribune. Not a puff piece, a real conversation about domestic violence, power, escape. The interview happened in the library. Naomi in comfortable clothes, rather than the designer outfit Sophie initially suggested. She wanted to look like herself, not like someone playing a role. The journalist, Karen Martinez, was in her 50s, sympathetic but professional. She asked hard questions. "Why didn't you leave earlier?" "Because leaving isn't simple. He was a cop. He had connections. When I tried to file a report, it disappeared. When I tried to leave, he found me. The system that's supposed to protect victims protected him instead." "But you eventually did leave. What changed?" "I sent a text to what I thought was a co-worker's number. It wasn't. It was Kang Jun-sok's. He responded, asked where I was, sent people who could actually help. You're currently living with Mr. Kang. Some people are saying this is just trading one controlling relationship for another. Those people don't know what they're talking about. Jun-sok gave me a choice. Evan never did. That's the difference. Yes, Jun-sok is powerful. Yes, he operates in morally gray areas. But he's never made me feel small. He's never made me afraid. And when I say no to him, he respects it. That's not control. That's partnership. You're defending a man who, according to public records, runs an organization with suspected ties to organized crime. I'm defending a man who saved my life when the people who were supposed to protect me looked the other way. You want to talk about crime. Talk about how many domestic violence complaints get buried because the abuser has a badge. Talk about how the system protects violent men more effectively than it protects their victims. Then we can have a conversation about moral complexity." The interview ran the next day with the headline, "Trauma Nurse Speaks Out About Escape from Abusive Relationship, Defends Unlikely Rescuer." The response was immediate and divided. Half the comments praised her courage, shared their own stories of abuse and escape, talked about the failures of the system to protect victims. The other half called her a gold digger, said she was romanticizing criminals, insisted she'd traded up from one abuser to a wealthier one. She read them all. Every comment, every hot take, every judgment from strangers who knew nothing about her life. "You should stop reading those," Jun-suk said, finding her at 2 a.m. still scrolling through social media. "Why? These are what people think of me. I should know. These are what strangers with no stake in your life think based on incomplete information. Their opinions are worthless. But they're loud. So are most worthless things." He sat beside her, took the phone gently from her hands. What you did was brave. You told your truth, despite knowing it would be picked apart. That's not weakness. That's strength. Then why do I feel like I just exposed myself for nothing? Because change is slow. Because people are comfortable with their narratives about victims and villains. Because disrupting those narratives makes people uncomfortable. He paused. But you also gave voice to others who've experienced what you have. Look, he pulled up a different thread, messages from women thanking her, sharing their stories, talking about how her interview had given them courage to leave, to speak, to fight back. These matter more, he said. These are the people you're actually talking to. 3 days after the interview, the federal investigation into Evans' record became public. Someone, probably Vincent, working through channels Naomi didn't fully understand, had leaked the evidence of evidence, tampering, witness, intimidation, abuse of power, not just in Naomi's case, but across Evans' entire career. The case files that had gone missing, the women who'd been threatened into silence, the superiors who'd covered for him, all of it suddenly public, forcing the FBI and Department of Justice to investigate what CPD had ignored. Evans' fall was spectacular and complete. His father tried to call press conferences, defend his son, claim this was a conspiracy, but the evidence was too strong, too detailed, too thoroughly documented. Evan himself disappeared from public view. Rumor was he'd checked into a rehab facility in Arizona. Naomi hoped it was true, hoped he actually got help, but she also stopped caring what happened to him. He was no longer her problem. On a Thursday evening, 2 weeks after the interview, Naomi was cooking dinner she'd insisted on learning to use the professional kitchen that had been sitting largely unused when Jun-sok came home looking tired. Bad day. Long day. The fallout from all of this has been complicated. Some business associates are nervous about the attention. Others are impressed. Everyone has opinions. Are you regretting it? The public exposure? No. But I am reconsidering my timeline for transitioning to legitimate operations. The scrutiny makes certain activities more difficult. So I'm bad for business. You're the best thing that's happened to my business in years. You've humanized me in ways I never could alone. People see me differently now, not just as a criminal with good suits, but as someone capable of genuine relationships. That's valuable. Relationships as business strategy. Very romantic. I didn't say you were business strategy. I said you're valuable. There's a difference. He came into the kitchen, stood close to her. Though I admit, my feelings about you are decidedly non-strategic. What does that mean? It means that somewhere between the text and now, between watching you learn to fight back and watching you stand up to public scrutiny, I stopped thinking of you as a rescue project and started thinking of you as, he paused, as mine. The word hung between them. Possessive, she said. Yes, I told you I don't do things halfway. And if I don't want to be yours, then I'll be disappointed. But you'll still be safe, still be free, still have access to everything I can provide. He stepped back, giving her space. But I think you do want it. I think that's what scares you. He was right, and she hated that he was right. Because somewhere between the gym sessions and the dinners and the moments of quiet understanding, she'd stopped seeing him as her rescuer and started seeing him as, what? Partner? Protector? Something more complicated that she didn't have words for? I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to be with someone without waiting for them to hurt me. Then we'll learn together. No expectations, no timeline. Just, he gestured at the space between them. This, whatever this becomes. The pasta was overcooking. She turned back to it, focused on the practical task of draining noodles when her emotions were too large to process. They ate dinner, talked about nothing important, avoided the conversation they'd just had like it hadn't happened, but something had shifted. Later, as she stood at her bedroom window looking at the lake, she heard a soft knock. Come in. Jun-sok entered, still in his work clothes, but with that tied, loosened. He looked almost human like this, almost vulnerable. I lied earlier, he said. About what? When I said my feelings are non-strategic. That's not entirely true. Everything I do is strategic. But, he stopped at the window beside her. But with you, the strategy is just trying not to lose you, trying to make you want to stay. Not because you need to, but because you choose to. That's still manipulation, probably. But it's honest manipulation, and it's the best I can offer. She should have been angry, should have seen this as confirmation of everything Rosa warned her about, everything the public comments said, everything her own doubts whispered. Instead, she leaned her head against his shoulder. He went still, like he was afraid any movement might break the spell. "I'm still scared," she whispered. "I know. Of you. Of this. Of who I might become if I stay. That's fair. But I'm more scared of going back to who I was. Small and silent and invisible. You were never invisible. Not to me." They stood like that for a long time, watching the water, existing in the space between past trauma and possible future. Finally, Naomi spoke. "If I stay, if I actually choose this, we do it my way. Which is, slowly, honestly. No games, no manipulation, even honest manipulation. And the first time you make me feel small or scared, or less than I am, I leave. No discussion, no second chances. Agreed? Agreed. Though I should mention you're describing a relationship, not a contract. Good. Because I'm done with contracts. I want something real. Then that's what we'll build." He kissed her forehead. Nothing more. Just that gentle touch. And then he left her alone with the lake and the night, and the decision she'd just made. To stay. To choose. To become whoever she was supposed to be next. 6 months later, Naomi stood in the penthouse apartment in downtown Chicago that she and Jun-Sok had moved into together, a compromise between his need for security and her need to feel like she hadn't been extracted from the world entirely. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out in every direction. Not the Chicago she'd known as a struggling nursing student, or the one she'd survived as Evan's fiancé. A different Chicago entirely, one she was learning to navigate on her own terms. Her phone buzzed. "Jessica, still on for drinks Thursday. Wouldn't miss it. Same place? You know it. Can't wait to hear about the non-profit launch." The non-profit was Naomi's project, a foundation providing resources and legal support for domestic violence survivors, particularly those whose abusers had institutional protection. Funded by Jun-Sok's increasingly legitimate business operations, staffed by people who actually understood the systems that failed victims. It was real work, meaningful work, work that turned her experience into something that helped others, rather than just something that had happened to her. "Ready?" Jun-Sok appeared from the bedroom, dressed casually. They were meeting Sophie and Vincent for dinner, a regular occurrence now that she'd become fully integrated into his life, his world, his operations. Almost. "Did the Seoul contracts go through?" "Signed this morning. The transition to legitimate operations is ahead of schedule. Another 2 years, and we'll be clean." "Cleanish," she corrected. "Cleanish," he agreed, with a slight smile. In the car they drove themselves now sometimes. Security still present, but less obvious. Jun-Sok reached for her hand. "I need to tell you something." Her heart jumped. "That sounds ominous." "Not ominous. Just significant. I had a conversation with federal prosecutors last week. They're interested in using information I have about certain operations. Not mine," he clarified, "but organizations I've worked adjacent to. They're offering full immunity in exchange for cooperation. You'd be a witness. I'd be someone who helps them dismantle networks that make my business look like a neighborhood bakery. And in return, everything I've done, everything I've built, becomes officially sanctioned past actions of a cooperating witness. That's huge. It's freedom. Real freedom. Not just the illusion of it. We could travel without worrying about warrants. We could operate completely in the open. We could," he paused, "we could be normal. Or as normal as we're capable of being. What's the catch? I have to testify. Publicly. In trials that will take years. My face. My name. My operations. All of it becomes part of the public record. You'd be a target. I'm already a target. But yes, it would increase certain risks, which is why I need you to decide if it's worth it. Because this affects you too." She thought about it. about the life they'd built in these 6 months. Strange, unconventional, but undeniably theirs. About the foundation, the friends, the city they were learning to love without fear. "Do it," she said. "You're sure?" "I spent 2 years being afraid because I stayed silent. I won't make that mistake again. If you can help take down people who do what Evan did, what his father helped cover up, yes, do it." He pulled over, not dramatically, just finding a parking space on a busy street, turned to face her fully. "I love you," he said. "I don't say it lightly. I probably don't say it enough. But I need you to know that this, us, it's not strategy anymore. It never really was. But now it's not even pretending to be. You're the reason I'm doing this. The reason I'm choosing to actually be legitimate instead of just looking legitimate. Because you deserve someone who isn't constantly calculating the angles." Naomi's throat felt tight. "I love you too. Even though you're still the most complicated person I've ever met. Even though this whole situation is insane. I love you." They kissed there in the car, on a random Chicago street, with all the passion and relief of people who'd finally figured out they were supposed to be together. Then they went to dinner. Normal. Almost. Evan's trial happened in the fall. Naomi attended every day, sitting in the gallery, watching as witness after witness testified about his pattern of abuse, his manipulation, the system that had protected him. She didn't testify her recorded interview, and the evidence Jun-Suk had compiled was sufficient. Evan looked broken in the defendant's chair. Genuinely broken, not performing. He'd lost weight, gained grey hair, seemed to have aged a decade in less than a year. She felt sorry for him, not enough to forgive, but enough to recognize that he was also a product of systems that created men like him, that rewarded violence and control, that taught him he could take whatever he wanted without consequence. The jury convicted on all counts. Evan would spend the next 15 years in prison. His father left the courtroom without a word, his political ambitions dying with his son's conviction. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Naomi had learned to handle them. Polite deflection, careful sound bites, no emotions they could twist into narratives. "How do you feel about the conviction?" they asked. "I feel relieved. For myself and for every other woman he hurt. I hope he gets genuine help in prison. I hope he becomes someone different when he gets out." "Do you think the system worked?" "I think the system failed for years and finally worked once enough pressure was applied. That's not justice, that's barely accountability. And your relationship with Mr. Kang is none of your business." "Next question." They laughed. She'd learned to handle press, like Jun-Sok did, with humor and boundaries. That night, back in their apartment, she finally let herself cry. Not for Evan, but for the woman she'd been. Terrified in a bathroom, sending a text to a wrong number because she had no other options. Jun-Sok held her, said nothing, just let her grieve the person she'd had to be to survive. "I'm proud of you," he finally said, "for crying, for surviving, for fighting back, for building something meaningful out of trauma, for," he paused, "for choosing me, despite every reason not to. You make it sound romantic. It was mostly practical. You had resources I needed. And now I stay because I want to. Because you see me as whole instead of broken. Because you challenge me without controlling me. Because," she lifted her head from his chest, "because you're mine too. And I protect what's mine. Very possessive. I learned from the best." A year after the text, Naomi stood in the Foundation's new offices in the South Loop. 6 rooms, full staff, already helping dozens of women navigate the systems that had failed her. Rosa worked there now, coordinating outreach. Jessica volunteered on weekends. Even some of Naomi's former co-workers from Northwestern had gotten involved. It was real. It was helping. It was proof that terrible things could become catalysts for meaningful change. Jun-Sok arrived at 5 p.m., as promised, for the official opening ceremony. He'd funded everything but insisted on staying in the background. This was Naomi's project. Her victory. "How does it feel?" he asked, watching her navigate the small crowd of donors, volunteers, and the first clients they'd helped. "Terrifying. Like I'm responsible for all of this." "You are. That's what makes it meaningful." Did you always know? When you answered that text, did you know it would lead to this? I knew it would lead to you being safe. Everything else was bonus. He took her hand. Though I admit, this outcome exceeded expectations. They stood together in the space she'd built, surrounded by proof that survival could transform into something larger than just escaping. Outside, Chicago continued its endless rhythm: trains, traffic, millions of people living complicated lives. Somewhere in the city, another woman was probably struggling with the same choices Naomi had faced. Another person was probably sending a desperate text, hoping someone would respond. The difference was that now, there was a system designed to actually help, imperfect, but present, growing stronger with each person it assisted. That night, in their apartment above the city, Naomi stood at the window where she'd spent so many nights learning to feel safe again. Jun-sok joined her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. "No regrets?" he asked. "About which part? The text? Staying? Building a life with you? Any of it?" She thought about it, about everything that had led to this moment. The violence, the fear, the wrong number that was actually right, the choice to trust a stranger, the work to rebuild herself. No regrets. Just, she paused, just gratitude that when I reached out in the dark, you were there to answer. Always will be. That's very romantic for a reformed criminal. Reformed-ish, he corrected, making her laugh. They stood like that for a long time, watching the city, existing in the space they'd created between who they'd been and who they were becoming. Naomi Carter, trauma nurse, survivor, accidental founder, unlikely partner to a man who ruled his world through intelligence and force, but who'd learned to be gentle with the one person who'd never asked him to be anything but honest. Kang Jun-sok, syndicate leader transitioning to legitimacy, obsessive in his protections, possessive in his affections, learning to build something real with someone who saw past his power to the person beneath. Two people who shouldn't have worked, who defied every narrative about healthy relationships, who'd built something strange and meaningful and entirely their own. The wrong number, the right answer, and the proof that sometimes salvation arrives from unexpected places, through accidental connections, in forms we never imagined, but desperately needed. Chicago sparkled below them, full of possibility, and for the first time, in longer than she could remember, Naomi felt not just safe, but free. Actually, genuinely free. Not because someone had rescued her, though that helped, but because she'd learned to rescue herself, and chosen to build a life with someone who'd never asked her to be anything less than exactly who she was. Complicated, strong, still healing, but absolutely, undeniably whole. The end.